Well, welcome back to Conversations with Dad with Col Maybury. And Col Maybury now is in the 70s still, because we had so much going on in the 70s. So Dad had many stories for the 70s to tell. And here we are with his invention of the stop and go sign. So I'm going to leave it over to Dad to talk about his invention, because it was a very exciting period of Dad's life. So go for it, Dad. Talk about your stop and go situation here.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting to me because in 1975, I should say, the economy was slowing a little, and I could feel it in the number of people that were calling us to do things for them. And so I decided to go to an invention that I had thought of years before, but I'd been too busy to take it up. So I decided to take it up. You know, the stop and go men on a roadway site, they tend to carry bats that have stop and go on them, and they turn them in the right direction. Well, there are two of them, one for each end, to go into a single lane and stop the traffic for that transport. And so it could be automatic. So I made up an idea of an automatic machine, and I tried it out on Lake Macquarie Council, and they were enthusiastic. By all means, it would cut their staff down by one on every side. And that straight away was a great saving. And they were comparatively cheap. I decided to make them cheaply. And I tried them out in front of our house in a little quiet cul-de-sac. And all the engineers said, "Mate, great idea, we'll buy 5. So they bought 5 straight off, and I sold them to them for about $480. That's all it was. And all it was an electric motor controlled by a multi-function switch, and also a locating beam on the bottom of the stop and go bat. And that would turn to stop or go dependent on the operator down at midway between the two. And because of their, how can I say, excellent reaction, I decided I'd try it on others. So I rang Sydney Council and told them, and they said, "Well, bring one down and try it out for us." So we did. And we did it on a bridge roadway just near St. Vincent's Hospital. And I set it up and then immediately turned it on and waited for the first one so I could try the driver out who was pulled up by the sign and see what they said.
Yeah.
Have a guess what? It was Cardinal Gilroy. He was sitting in the seat being driven by the chauffeur, and I said to the chauffeur, "What do you think of the stop-go sign?" And he said, "They're terrific." And Archbishop Gleeson, or Cardinal Gleeson, as he was at the time, said, very good, young man, very good." And I thought, well, if you've got holy commendation, obviously it's quite okay. So I thought, I'll go and try it on 3M. They were big at that time in supplying equipment for roadworks.
Yeah.
And I went to them in
they
Sydney.
used to do patents for everybody then. I remember that.
Sorry?
They used to do all the patents back then.
Yes. So I went to 3M, and the manager was enthusiastic, came out and looked at them on the roadway outside. We didn't stop any traffic, but we had them operating.
That would have been at Ryde, wouldn't it, in Sydney?
Sorry, it would have been?
At Ryde in Sydney?
Advice.
Ryde,
yes, and Pymble.
Yeah.
No, Pymble.
Okay, yeah, on the freeway.
Yeah. And anyway, all went well with that. And he said, "It's a pity you can't take this to America and see 3M over there." And I said, "Give me a letter of introduction." And he gave me a letter of introduction to 3M. And I went to the customs office in Newcastle with my birth certificate and 6 photographs and little photographs and whatever. And I said to the guy, "I'm going to America next Tuesday and I need a passport to go. Can I have a passport, please?" And he said, "Oh, you don't seem to understand." He said, "It takes 3 weeks for a passport." And I said, "No, it doesn't. You're not doing much. You're the only one who's on the
Oh, Col Maybury, what do you think?
And those three blokes over there are talking about racehorses. So, you know, you haven't got much work on, and there's plenty of time between now. It was Wednesday and Tuesday to have my passport. He said, come back Friday and you'll have a passport. So I came back Friday, a passport called Qantas 747. It was brand new then.
Wow, very exciting.
So I got to America, transferred at San Francisco, flew the next day across to Washington, and I started to find out about it. I went to meet the ambassador or the ambassadorial staff in Washington, and they said, oh, this is terrific. Do you know we can help? We can give you money for it and help you out. And so they gave me money, or later on they gave me money. They sent me a form I had to fill out. I got $2,000, I think it was, roundabout. And they said, what a pity you didn't get to meet the ambassador. He's away at the moment. So anyway, they were lovely to me. And even for years afterwards, I would get applications to fill in to ask for money if I needed it for this overseas sale, see. And so the next day, I went that night into a bar, and the weird coincidences that happened to you, I went in and I said to the first bloke at the edge of the bar, excuse me, can I talk to you? Because I want to find out from the Americans what they were like, who they did, whatever. I was curious. And he said, yes, you certainly can talk to me, but I'm just finishing this beer and I'm going to see the wife's waiting for me. And he got up and walked out. And I thought, well, that's not a great reaction.
No.
What do I do? What about the next one? And so I said to the next one, excuse me, can I speak to you? And he said to me, where are you from? And I said, and I was going to say Sydney, and then I said, Newcastle, Australia. And he said, Newcastle, I was there. I was down there in 1969 in the USS.
And what year are we talking about here now?
Sorry?
What year were you there then?
75.
So, okay, so 6 years later, yeah.
No, year after 60, 74.
Oh.
I go to Grid Island.
Oh, yeah.
And he said to me, how's that Adamstown? And I said, it's great. Adamstown is great. And, I'm so pleased to meet you.
Wow, what a coincidence. And
he'd been there in a nuclear submarine to Newcastle in 1969, 5 years before.
Yeah.
He got out just after he came back to America and applied for and got a grant to go to university and was now a history teacher.
Wow.
He started to talk about American history and he said, come on, if you're going away tomorrow to St. Paul, Minnesota, to the 3M headquarters, he said, I've got to take you around and show you the town. And he went round and took me to the Capitol, to Lincoln's tomb, to the Potomac River and across to Arlington to the...
How generous.
Yeah, and get this, you know where those blokes attacked under Trump, attacked the Capitol?
Yes.
Had to climb up to the top. He drove straight up there, just up that ramp onto that. It's a big landing there where you can turn around and go back.
And no security.
And as we got there and stopped, two policemen started walking down from up the steps into the foyer. And he wound his window down. They were on his side, on the left-hand side. And he yelled out, everything's all right. I've got here an Aussie and he wants to have a look around. And I said, okay, and turned around and walked back.
They don't do anything wrong.
And left us. And he said, you've got to go out and have a look at the foyer. I'll talk to the cops. So we walked up the stairs and he started talking to the two cops. And I walked into the foyer and I got in the foyer and I went, oh, hell. It's the most magnificent building inside that you can possibly imagine. And I thought, but I'm not supposed to be here. There's something wrong somewhere. So I got out of there and went down. And he said, well, let's go to the Pentagon. So off we went to the Pentagon and we drove all around the Pentagon while he told me all the parts to it. And then we went to President Kennedy's grave over in Arlington. Oh, it was magnificent. But by the time we finished, because of time lag and things like that, I was just about falling asleep. Oh, we went to the church that John F. Kennedy used to go to in Georgetown and to the university in Georgetown, and he showed me where his room was up in the cloister or whatever it is, you know.
And so, come on, Dad,
you
I'm wanting to
couldn't-
know about your invention. What's going on with your invention?
Right.
You're
So
sidetracking here.
next day, can I tell you the story about the cab driver?
Oh, yeah, okay, go for it.
So next day, I had to go down to, I talked to a bloke in my hotel that morning, and he said, if you're going up to St. Paul, you're going to need a top coat. Have you got a top coat? And I said, no. He said, get a big top coat because it's cold. That's a cold country. So I went out and bought a very big coat, and in the style of the famous detectives, you know, great big coat,
Like a trench coat.
belt and whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, next day I got a taxi and drove down, and a black guy was driving. Yeah, how do you come to be Aussie? And he said, my grandma was Aussie. And I said, your grandma? And he said, yeah, she came from Paraguay. And I said, Australians don't come from Paraguay. And believe it or not, they do. 360 of them went over in 1896 to formulate two towns over there, New Australia and Cosmos. And so he did. I found a bloke who'd written a book about it, and I bought the book from him, signing. It was just coincidental. It was right at that time. But the black man drove away down the street yelling out, see Aussie, see Aussie. And I'm saying, goodbye, Aussie, look after yourself. That sort of thing. I got to cut the story. I got the temporary patent because I had to have something of authority to take the 3M, otherwise they might cheat me out of it. So I went up there and I stayed at the Hyatt Hotel, which was on the banks of the Mississippi, a giant river, you know, and going up and down were little punts or tugs pushing great big coal bins, the coal barges, and they were taking it to the power station, which was about 400 or 500 metres away. And I was on about the 10th floor, and it was lovely up there. Anyway, next day I went to 3M, and 3M had two great big glass buildings separated by about 40 metres, and across those two gaps were glassed-in walkways so that you could commune from one to the other. And as we were walking across, I said, what are the eagles pictures on the glass floor? And they said, that's because smaller birds fly in between here, get caught in the wind that's pushing the air through the gap and smash into the glass. So we put eagle pictures up on it, and sure enough, that stopped the little birds coming anywhere near the two great big skyscrapers. It was lovely. Yeah. We got there, I explained it all, I showed them how they operated, whereabouts and why, and they said, very good, very good. Now, will you join us in the executive dining room for dinner? And I went into the executive dining room, and we were eating dinner and talking with questions backwards and forwards, and all of a sudden, there was a stone dead silence. And I looked up, and there's about 12 people at this table, this long table that we were eating at, and every one of them was sitting, staring at me quietly. And you know what it was? I was eating with a knife and fork. They have only the fork. They cut their food up.
Yeah, it's an American way to eat. Yeah.
So I was you know, amazed them that I would use both in that way.
At the same time.
Yeah, and that happened again in Washington. I noticed I was in a restaurant, very high-class restaurant, and I noticed silence, and I looked around.
I've been amazed that when I've been in the States.
Staring at They'd never
Very
seen
different cultural thing. Dad,
anyway,
back to your invention.
Sorry?
Back to your invention. Our time's nearly up.
So they said, right, we'll negotiate over this and we'll get back to you and let you know. And so they wrote back and they said, get it going in your own country first so you can prove it. And
Oh, no.
And anyway, but we'd sold quite a few by that time.
But I need some more explanation about the invention. I'm sort of not quite, like, I do vaguely remember it. I remember being very proud when we drove along and I saw it in so many places. So I remember it being on a trailer and sitting there all bright and shiny. But I need some more stories about, that's why I want the stories about the invention. You haven't really talked about it.
All right. I'd applied to go on the Inventors, which was a big show.
Yeah.
On ABC at the time. And they said, yes, come in, we will do a special program especially for you.
Yeah.
But when I got the papers about how it came about, it said you have to state that you have not sold any of these, that you still haven't been in a sale. And of course, I'd sold quite a few by that time. So I just ticked this box. I ticked that I hadn't sold any. We were to go on the Inventors, a special program on the Sunday and live and talk about it. And the lady producer was a lady called Beverly, and we'd spoken quite a bit on the phone. And on the Saturday morning, she rang me and she said, Colin, this is Beverly, and you fucking lied to me. And I went, how do you know, Beverly? And she said, I was coming through Palm Beach or somewhere, and there were the traffic controllers working, and I got out of the car.
So I want to explain the traffic controllers too. So you sold it before it went on the Inventors, right? By that.
Yeah.
And you weren't allowed to sell it. But here is the traffic controller in the picture behind us. Here is the stop. And there was one, that meant there was one person with a radio controller with the switch instead of two council workers with the lollipops, right? The lollipops going, turn it, turn it, turn it. And instead there was one council worker now with a radio controlled switch, which turned the lollipop automatically, right?
Yes.
So that meant there was one employee gone off the council to do other things. So the council then would save on wages, right? And buy your traffic controller.
Yes.
Great idea. What happened?
Well, when after Beverly told me, we're in trouble because we won't have a show without you. So, but we can't let you go on. You've broken the rules.
But you sold it before you went on the show.
Yeah, but I'd already sold it before I even got to the stage of filling out the form. So I was already gone.
So you didn't tell them, I'm already in a commercial situation here.
And I thought, I have had this. I've been working flat out for about 6 months, night and day, going to America, going to New Zealand. I went to New Zealand with it.
Yeah.
Had it on TV in New Zealand and actually sold it to New Zealand, the rights to it. And anyway, I said, I've had it. So I went to the bloke that was totally building them. And I thought, I've got to lay him off. And I said to him, this job is you are far too good for this job. And he said, I know, Col, I was thinking about giving my notice. And I went, oh, thank God, because I liked him, and I didn't want to sack him. And anyway, so he left and I just closed it down, sold the ones I still had. Those bills came in and no one ever complained about them. No one ever said anything about them, but I just didn't take on. I just quietly shelved. I think the union said quiet in the ear of the councils, don't put them on. You're putting people out of work,
Okay, right.
But anyway, it was a marvellous experience and I had allowed to do it for $10,000. I totaled up the money and it worked out to over $40,000. but we'd got $40,000 back in sales, so everything worked out fine.
So you didn't become a millionaire out of it, or even a thousandaire out of it.
No, but I got an experience that
You had a great time. You went to America. You got a great tour of Washington.
Yeah. How can you pick that up?
Yeah.
Newcastle, been there in
Yeah.
nuclear submarine USS.
And the concept was great, and the invention was great. But because of Labor and because of, well, the invention not taking off because maybe you told a few fibs.
Yeah, that's quite on the card. I was getting desperate.
But a story worth telling and a story worth keeping.
And I relied so much on the inventors. I thought the inventors will spread it all over Australia for me, because every engineer watches the inventors.
And maybe somewhere in Australia, it would have been great where there weren't enough employees to stop and start on freeways that were far apart. But it never got around, so it didn't take off.
Maybe sometime in the future.
Who knows?
But you're doing it now with
traffic lights.
Stop and go lights.
They do it with traffic lights. So the idea did take off, but it took off with traffic lights.
Yeah.
Well done, Dad. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you, Kathleen.
You were before your time.
Oh, well, that was the name of the game with automation and instrumentation.
Yeah. One idea just took off after the other, and then before you know it, you were gone. No different than computers and apps, isn't it? As soon as you think of it, someone else has taken off faster than you.
Well, 40,000 at that time would now be over 200,000.
Yeah,
so spent a bit on it, but recouped it as well.
Excellent. All right. Well, great. Awesome story, Dad. Okay, so nothing is a failure, is it?
That's true.
Great.
A lot of experience.
A lot of experience. But I'm glad that you chose this one for this story to keep in your pool of stories. So what will the next be? What will the next story be? We need to move out of the 70s, I think.
Righto. In 1988, I sold the company, and I had promised Marcy someday I would take her to America and show her that wonderful country that I had seen with the traffic controllers. And all of a sudden, my ex-apprentice, my head technician, I said to him, things are going to get bad. We ought to go better, and maybe it might be better to sell the company. And he said, what would you want for it? And I got a shock, and I suddenly thought, and I said, 120,000 at that time, and 2 cars, any tools that I want, and of course the buildings that I had built. I had 2 buildings at Cardiff. Okay. He said, I'll see what I can do. And I went, oh shit, I'm about. I've been paying him too much, obviously. Anyway.
All right. Well, that's where we might go next week. So we'll talk to you then, and we'll see what will come up then. So you can use your mind and start to think about that. If that's the story that you want, then we'll go there. There might be something else that you might think of between now and then, but we'll see. All right?
Yep.
Okay. Lovely talking to you.
Thank you.
See you then. Well, I'm sure I'll see you before, but anyway, we'll see you.